Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at Fitz popping off on King's Row first for the the popping off powered by Jack in the Box, followed shortly after by looking at some of the latest patch notes for the experimental changes.
After that, we're going to be taking a look at the key matchups this weekend before the tournament. May tournament is finally here next weekend, and then we'll be wrapping things up as per usual with our mailbag.
I'm Avast, this is Jayne, and welcome to Contested. Welcome back, everybody. Once again, we are not live from the Frontier Communication Studio in Dallas, Texas. Still respecting those stay-at-home orders, and we're still just keeping safe, staying in place for now, though it hasn't really stopped us as we've continued to produce and innovate. Pre-show, such an innovative idea here at the Contested workshop. When we hop into the lab, as they say, and we cook it up, we were like, what if we pre-show? And everyone was like, everyone clapped. We got the diamond plaque there. Record is like, well done, great idea. And get back to work. So, besides that tangent, how are you, Jayne?
I'm doing fantastic. I liked the iteration. We're inventing new things, more esports content. We are.
Yeah, we're the first to ever think of pre-show.
We are absolutely. It's never been done before. Unique. It's really quite a giant leap forward in esports content. So we are pioneering, trailblazing all of that content. But yeah, so another episode. Today's a bit of an interesting one because we are looking forward to the matches this weekend, which are going to be crazy, and then the format changes. So there's lots to talk about, and there's a lot to, it's going to be
a lot of news throughout the day. But first, before we get to the news,
yes,
we need to talk about who popped off. And who did pop off in this, our popping off powered by Jack in the Box, is Fitz of the Soul Dynasty. That is who was popping off, and it was on King's Row on the second push. And it was big. Very, very big. I'm actually not sure. I'm just going to... Okay, good. I'm making sure because, we did the pre-show, so it's thrown off my workflow a little bit because it's such an innovative concept. But we're on King's Row on second, and it's Fitz versus the Shanghai Dragons here, where Seoul actually recently beat the Dragons this past weekend in a post 5 map set. And King's Row is going to be the third map of the series on second point. They had just gotten steamrolled on first. All Dragons are walking in through this choke. They already have the Baptiste window available. They walk in and immediately vaporize Gesture. They catch him on the corner using the freeze, using Li Zhegong's window. And Fitz actually hits a huge dragon, which not only zones, but kills 3 members of the Dragons here on the bookstore, on the mini pack on the right. From the defender side, it gets rid of both the DPS. It gets rid of Void, and that means that, and because of the split afterwards, Soul are able to retake and stop the momentum from Dragons, and they get a pretty decent time here holding on second. Though, the rest of the defense doesn't go well after these next 2 fights, but it's still an incredibly important moment because it stops the momentum for the Dragons.
I think my favorite thing about this clip is how relatable it is at the very start. When you see them coming through, like Fitz is at 95% to his ult charge, and then he fires 1 arrow, and then as soon as they walk through, he just kind of whips out the storm arrows and he's like just gotta get 1 shot on target because he wants to get that ultimate so that he can find that perfect blade right through the hallway, right through the choke point. But his aim just goes entirely to mush, where he's just like arbitrarily aiming to the giant center of the enemy team, not particularly shooting at anybody because he just wants that 1 last arrow to get his ultimate. Very relatable. It's kind of like,
it is
Soldier. It's just like shoot in the middle of it. It's like, one of these bullets will hit, and then I get ult, and then I get a beautiful tracking. But no, it was a good play.
He's been a high point, I think. For
he's
Dynasty.
Been really good, really good. A lot of the teams are kind of being, I don't want to say categorized, but the DPS, there have been a lot of players. We're kind of back into a little bit of a meta where we do see more carry DPS plays. Maybe it's just we're back to a normal level amount, and it's just kind of used to what it was last year, where goats and there was no kind of big individual carries plays. But you see people like Enz, you see people like Glister. They've been putting out some pretty crazy solo performances, and it is nice to see again. It is nice to see that importance of having those superstar DPS players.
It's nice to come back to a moment where we're not all playing the perfect meta 3-3, the truly honest meta of 3-3, where you had 3 tanks, 3 supports, the most honest you could get. But I think it's nice also because also people underrated Fitz in particular for Dynasty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and Dynasty also recently added Slime to their main support list,
pretty cool.
which is pretty interesting because most people agree that Toby wasn't really the issue for
No.
Seoul at any point. But it is nice to see some of those old Titans members get a home here now with Seoul, and also it's Slime, and everyone loves Slime because Slime is really, really good, and it gives them a bit of explosiveness and also not just roster depth. But Slime can play a much more aggro style of Lucio. Toby's BAP has been really good, so they give them some options to sort of balance out how they want to play in certain maps. So far, though, Toby has been tried to be benched many times, and he has always persevered. There can only be one. It's like Highlander over here, and Toby has generally come out on top of all the other people that have been to bench Toby. So we'll have to see if Slime actually
it's a dangerous thing. If you saw the Seoul Dynasty cycle, that was it was a funny image posted on Reddit, but it was like one of the steps was bench Toby, and after that it was just like suffer immensely. So the benching Toby curse is real. You got to be real careful about doing that. But if you are going to bring him in for a player like Slime, well, hopefully the curse is broken. But it just going back to Fitz, Fitz came from like a middle tier Korean contenders team. I think it was Going Water S, and then which placed 4th or 5th in Korean contenders. And it always does really amaze me when you can pick a DPS player from kind of like a mid-tier team and really show that they are top tier even in the higher tier of play. So things like that just makes me really happy to see good scouting coming out from teams like Seoul Dynasty.
That's a Korean flex DPS special, though. Is that, I mean, think about it. Fleta. I mean, the Fleta, like, he came from an awful team, and that's where Fleta originated. Then we had Fitz. Also, Jerry's the newest iteration of that, too, with Boston. It's like, yes, is his team also terrible? Sure. But the thing is that he's popping off still, and his team was even worse than some of those other aforementioned teams in Korean contenders when he came from Meta Athena at the time. So I think that it's just really just a classic Korean contenders where you just bring up some flex DPS legend that actually was way better than what the team intended. Early show.
I think one of the most surprising scouts and pickups that I think I've ever seen was Quartermain when he got picked up from the London Spitfire. Like, he came out of nowhere. It was rumored that he was being picked up, and I was like, who in the hell is
Isn't
Quartermain?
It Quatermain? Because there's no technically R. There's like, it always confuses everyone to read it because for some reason it's like a vaguely close to the word Quartermain, but not quite the word Quartermain. So I think it's like
it's some of the Asian and Chinese words, like people picking like the word although for their gamer tag. Like, you would think. I don't think anyway.
There was DPS. There was a player called DPS.
And he was a tank player.
Yeah, which was super fun.
A main tank player. I don't even know where we are. What are we supposed to be talking about?
We were on the topic of Seoul Dynasty. We were talking about Fitz because we were doing the popping off, and then we got into Slime joining the team. There's the hope of where do the next Titans players land. Also, I mean, for Toby in particular, let's just say like could be the route of like maybe eventually goes to the player coach, which I don't think is going to happen. I think Toby, people underestimate Toby, but Mangachu for the Defiant just went to a player coaching role.
Which is really cool. Yeah.
Which is interesting. I think Mangachu is like a pretty senior figure at this point within Overwatch esports, all things considered, which is funny to think about if you personally know Mangachu.
Yeah.
But that's just an esports thing in general. It's funny to think about these people that you might personally know are like considered senior figures now. But it's nice to see what might results come of it.
I think Mangachu would be a fantastic player coach. I've worked with him before. He's kind of got that good mentality where, just like it's hard to kind of explain the way that Mangachu plays because he does have a very kind of creative style and looks at things a little bit differently. But that different perspective is something that can be really helpful as a coach. Especially somebody who's been so successful as a pro, being creative both with heroes and compositions and play styles. Just it adds that little bit of spice. Even when Mangachu's still not playing himself, if he's bringing those suggestions and that creativity from his own play that he's demonstrated over years to the Toronto Defiant, I think that he'll do really quite well. So do the Toronto Defiant have?
They have another player coach is Ascoft, I believe. Ascoff. Or is it Little Bow?
Yeah, Little
Ascoff?
Bow.
Little Bow, yeah.
Yeah. So
I haven't been on player coaches though. I haven't been big on them. I'm not big on them, Jane.
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna let you know. I'm not big on them because generally they're more of like stopgaps for players to just for organizations because they like the player and they just put them there even if they don't necessarily have any proficiency for coaching because they want to keep them around and then they just get rid of them the next year.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been huge on most player coach transitions because most of the time it's more of a stopgap because an organization likes someone versus an organization actually identifying like a skill set. Not that I think Mangachu falls under that category. I'm just saying I don't normally like the process.
And really, it's a win-win. You go, like, your point is 100% valid, but there's benefits to the organization in the fact that Mangachu is an extremely popular player, so he still gets tied with the organization, tied with the actual team. They still get to use him. And as well, Mangachu, in his actual tweet, what did he say? Appreciate the org letting me explore this potential career path. Like, it's very clear that they're treating this as something that Mangachu might potentially do. He's given it his shot, sort of thing. So, it also gives Mangachu the time to find out whether or not he even likes being a coach, whether it's a player coach or not. And very, very similar things have happened over the time. The one that I'm most familiar with is Coco. He tried the same thing. He tried to transition from player to coach, really didn't like it, retired and went back home. So it can work that way, but there are other people who have been more successful with the transition. Speaking of being more successful with the transition, though, I actually
is that a segue?
No, it's not. I actually can't think of a player coach that has successfully, or a player who has successfully transitioned to coaching.
I think Stoop was a pretty decent one.
He wasn't ever like actual Overwatch League.
Yes, he was. He wasn't in Overwatch League. Oh yeah, he wasn't in Overwatch League. You got me there. But he was a professional player.
Who is the most successful Overwatch player, or
Overwatch League player that has transitioned to coaching?
Players that were in the Overwatch League and transitioned to coach. Who is the most successful that fits into that category?
Kuki, probably. Kuki's head coach of the Mayhem currently.
Yeah, no, that would definitely fit.
That's probably the closest. Now, it remains to be seen how successful it is, right? Because they started out kind of rough, and also their schedule's been incredibly easy so far. So really,
True.
Mayhem actually hasn't been tested.
I mean, we can say they haven't been tested, but they are 5th in the damn league right now.
They are, but remember, the numbers aren't the truth. They just tell a story, and depending on how what's actually in them, right? So
yeah, chat mentioned S&T Awesome Guy as well. So I guess all the successful ones are just Korean. We just don't have any Western examples. So far
we have. I mean, to be fair, I think in general, like, we'll have to see as the season progresses, because there are definitely good Western. I think Stoop was a fantastic Western coach that transferred over. It just wasn't an Overwatch League player. So I think we need a little bit more time, because also obviously if the league is more predominantly Korean, you're going to have more player retirements that are Korean players, right? So it's just a numbers game, right? Aid is also, I think, a coach for the Defiant too, and Aid was the player for the Toronto Defiant last year. So, but we'll have to see, right? We'll just have to see.
So the next thing that came out, there was the new patch. The anniversary patch is announced today. But previously, we got the actual patch coming out, both on the experimental mode, as well as we got buffs to Junkrat, Bastion, and of course, to the delight of the forums, we also got the tiniest of Mercy buffs, just the cherry on top. There's always the one person on every single patch notes that come out that'd be like, no buff for Mercy, game's unplayable. So they gave.
Aid was Eternal, not Defiant. That was just I totally misremembered. Aid was a coach for Eternal, not the Defiant. So he played for the Defiant.
Yeah, I was going to say he definitely played for Defiant.
Yes, it would play for the Defiant, but now coach for Eternal. So I mixed those two up. I mixed those up a little bit, but yes. But experimental also, you got rated 3 out of 10 on your segue, by the way.
I mean, I am not the segue king. You are.
That's true. But we can talk about the
Rapier Man in chat was keeping time. He was like, time to change the subject. I was rushed. I was pressured. Wasn't my best performance.
Didn't hold up under the pressure there at the time. But but experimental mode is interesting because it was also balance changes in general have been a hot topic, right?
Yes.
And so
that is the understatement of the year.
We have spent a lot of time on balance changes and the seesaw of the balance discussion between, like, what do I feel and what is fact, and where does fact intersect with feeling, and fact fiction, where is he? He's not in the league. So like,
yeah.
But the whole point is it's been a very support oriented experimental change from all things. We have Moira, Zenyatta, Mercy, Ana. And then if you count Bastion healing themselves, technically that's almost a support, but like not really. A very supporting. So very, very focused on support roles for these changes, and it's definitely looks like they're trying to reduce the power of Moira a bit. Obviously, especially which is fantastic. I think that's really, really important when it comes, because I'm gonna be honest, no one likes Moira. Okay, no. And if you do like Moira, it's not a personal attack against you. The majority people don't like your character.
Even Moira players don't like Moira. It's just the way things work, and the way that they changed Moira was like pretty decent too. I think one of the most frustrating things was always the orb that had no intention at all of ever killing you. Just that thing that was like floating around. You know, there's only so many things that actually can deal with the orb. Basically, Sigma's black hole and Diva's defense matrix. So it's like, you know, seconds after the Moira orb was used for its intended purpose, it just like, you know, goes and bounces between hallways and kills you. So, you know, the reduction from the duration of the orb from 10 to 7 seconds, and then also reducing the speed, increasing the speed, 16 to 20 seconds, or 16 meters per second to 20 meters per second. It makes it's not going to just like sit there and trickle around you.
It's
just
not like a miasma, you know,
Yeah.
that's sitting on your head and just eating away at you, and you might accidentally die. It zooms away really quickly so you don't get
Yeah.
rolled, you know,
I mean,
which is nice.
Every single time we've talked about Moira, I've always said that the one change that you could make to Moira to just make her way, way less annoying and balance her a little bit more is just make sure her orb bounce off shields.
Yeah, but then we get back. See, you say that, which I agree with, but then we get into another solution. We get into another problem where with each buff to shields grow stronger, right? Because technically that is a buff to shields if orb can't go through them. See, I got you there, don't I?
This, out of all of the things that you could,
I got you there. It's something, but it is something we have to think about, right? Because when we make,
so you're telling me if we make it so that Moira's orbs can't pierce shields, that we might end up in a situation where like double shield becomes viable?
I mean, double shield's already viable. Like, I mean, it just makes it more, you know. It just, but you know, the point there, right?
Avast, blowing my mind here.
I'm just saying, I gotta be pedantic Perry over here, okay? I gotta be a pedantic Perry. It's just that it is what it is. You have to be. I just, it's the name of the game. But it's something to think about with balance, because in general, we've had this talk before, Jayne, and you've agreed, because, you know, as someone that's really interested in Go, obviously, you're very strategic now. He's very strategic now, Chet. And so you have to remember that with each, nerfs and buffs don't happen in a vacuum. So sometimes
this is very true. This is very true.
Changes other things. So now I was just being a little pooper. Like I don't think that would make much of a difference. Like, especially considering Cole would still go through shields, right? And all this other crap. But like, I actually don't think that would really matter that much. But like, I'm just saying it's something to keep in mind when we think about balance in relation to shields. So just a very important aspect. But overall, I like most of the changes. I like the buff to Discord Orb, because that's really sort of the focus of his kit, is the focus fire potential for Zenyatta. I liked most of the nerfs to Moira. I would like to see her fade and her right click touched a little bit, because it's a lot like Mei, I think, Jayne, where a lot of people misattribute what's so strong about the character. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, Orb is really good. But it's really the fact that she's a slippery little eel that's zooming around and can sustain herself while fighting flankers and healing. And the same way with Mei, where everyone's like, oh, Freeze is so annoying. Freeze is terrible. Yes, Freeze is really good for Mei, but the actual defining aspect for her at high level play is Wall. Wall, being able to instantly change and terraform the earth is like a much stronger attribute. And so I think that's like really a big aspect for Moira, is to look at like their shift in a right click.
This is the first change they've made to Moira in a long time, though, right?
It's been a while, I think.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So, you know, there's two different ways that you can balance heroes. You can balance them just by kind of like stats tweaks, and then you can actually change, you know, the play style, the survivability, the cooldowns, and how those work. And, you know, considering it's the first nerf to Moira, it's completely acceptable to me. Not that Blizzard cares about my opinion, but you know, it's good.
Hey, it's better than they just put my opinions directly into the you know, the opinion box, aka the furnace. So they just throw throw the papers in there.
Man, they don't even open my mail anymore. But you know, for the first change being just a pure stat nerf, and stats, like, they touched the right stats if they are going to do a stat nerf. You know, we don't have to touch the things that do make her quite powerful, like you're talking about. Her, you know, the fade is an extremely powerful ability, not only to like defensive, but you can also use it offensively, right?
Yeah. So sometimes to the ire of everyone watching, where I watch Moira's
hey man,
fade
I got
into
5
the
gold medals. You can take your criticism and shove it. I'm carrying this team.
That's true. That's fair. You're locking the nails and you're living life to the fullest.
Yeah, but the minor buffs, Anna, Mercy, sure, whatever. I think one of the one of my favorite changes in this entire patch is actually going to be the bomb detonation time reduction on Junkrat's Total Mayhem. Exploding a third of a second earlier might not make that big of a difference, but I just really hope, there's a part of me that's going to be just really gleeful when people get super angry to just dying to Total Mayhem way more than previously. That passive was always, you get used to it in like the first couple times you play against Junkrat, and after that, the only time you ever die to it, it ends up on a YouTube highlight reel. But no, I think it'll be a lot better. Struggling to actually kind of deal with him in a little bit closer ranges, just a little bit more. So I like it.
It's always, I nothing really like. I never really thought Junkrat. Junkrat's a lot to me in its current state was sort of reminding me of Genji, where it was like there's nothing inherently wrong with this kit. It's just everything else is power leveled over it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not so much of we need to make this character stronger. I feel like we just need to bring other things in line with it, because if we start making it too strong, they begin to very annoying territory very quickly. When we already have a character that's based around spam that has infinite ammo and does damage, full damage based on bounces, and you have a predator missile as an ult. So like I already there are definitely some aspects of the kit that are already pretty good. It's just everything else is over leveled. I also thought that it was interesting they reduced Ana's healing. Like they felt like they needed to nerf Ana of all the heroes.
Strange.
Like I get maybe if their goal is to, because they buffed Mercy's healing on the opposite side, so they're looking to make Mercy more viable and maybe nerf Ana a bit. But I really feel like the problem with Ana was never her healing, right? It was always just the fact that in terms of like as a character, some of the weaknesses and strengths of her was just about the fact that unlike Moira or even Mercy or Lucio, she can't go anywhere. She's just on the ground. And I don't know why.
But that's why she's a sniper, Avast.
Ah, yeah.
See, that's where
you got me there.
You have made a critical misstep.
I have made a critical misstep
She's
there, but
sniper.
I mean, maybe they're adjusting overall sustain, right?
Yeah,
it could be that.
Her big strength has always been in her utility, like especially the anti-nade sort of thing. So changes like this, when you see kind of changes where healing has been reduced by 5 or increased by 5, a part of me really hopes these changes aren't arbitrary and that they're actually driven by statistics. So I would think that they're trying to balance these out a little bit. It's like Mercy's change by 5 is a 10% increase for her. The decrease of 5 to Ana is only a decrease of like 6 or 7% to her. So it is like less of a nerf to Ana. But maybe it's just the fact that they kind of have a feeling for how much these heroes should heal. And they're trying to move them more into where they want. Not touching anti-nade. There's as long as anti-nade is in the game, Ana is going to have a place.
And Nano. Nano's also a very strong like ultimate. So I think those things, like she has some uses. Just once again, you can't shift away, right? You can't turn into a puddle of goo and just like go away like Moira, which is, I guess she doesn't turn into a puddle of goo so much. She doesn't liquefy. It's more of a shadow. It's more of a effervescence.
And it doesn't change. You're not changing the damage that her rifle does. So it was like nothing changes for her ability to defend herself. She's still same breakpoints for defending against opponents. So yeah, it's like it's I'm sure ML7's not going to be happy about that. But
no, he wasn't.
Yeah,
he complained about it. He said it made him sad. That's what he said.
Anna main complaining about Anna nerfs. Tell me.
And they touched Bastion technically as well. Don't forget that. They touched Bastion. But honestly, I mean,
return of the Omnic. Do you remember the Omnic Crisis? That was the worst week of Overwatch.
Oh, I thought you were asking me, like, literally, do I remember, like, were you there? The Omnic Crisis?
It was like the Omnic Crisis is what people called the Bastion meta.
Yeah, the Bastion, back when
Bastion,
you could just be invincible on
like
the card.
Literally
and
invincible to
survive,
everything.
Like,
wasn't
Diva
it like
Bomb?
a 50% ironclad?
It was an insane amount. Like, it was enough to where if you were in Sentry form on the cart and you got Diva Bombed and nanoed, you would survive the full blast of Diva Bomb. So, like, it was like a crazy amount.
Chat is having PTSD, and they have reminded us that it was actually a month on console because of the way that
is insane to me. Because console Bastion being unkillable, I don't even know what you do. I literally don't even know what you do if you're a console player at that point. If you have an unkillable Bastion, I would just leave. I would just like, okay, I'm done. Like I can't even deal with it.
I remember so many videos of like Genji's getting nanoed and just like sitting there slashing Bastion over and over and over again and just nothing happening. So we're not returning to the point where the Omnic Crisis has returned, because that was definitely on the back of ridiculous damage reduction stacking. But these are sizable buffs to Bastion. Like they
Yeah,
are.
it makes him it makes him stronger overall, does more damage, and also he has a little bit more sustain, like burst healing, which
I
is
mean,
the most important type.
little bit more sustain. Aren't these numbers like really, really good?
Well, his drain got increased, so he can't heal for as long, but it's a higher amount of heal, right? So,
Oh, I
but
read
burst
that wrong.
healing's more
Ooh.
more important though. I
Yeah,
think in
okay.
Overwatch overall.
Okay, when I
So,
first read this, I thought that it was reducing, like it was going to take 20% less to actually use it. But no, okay, so it's depleting faster. I thought it was
Yeah.
just more healing and it uses
No,
fewer
that would be
resources.
crazy.
And I was like, what is going on? But no, okay, so if we're moving more towards like burst healing, that makes sense. You know, that does make him a little bit more survival and survivable, and seems like a much more reasonable change. You know, the spread decrease as well. Okay, you know, it's
all right, you know. I didn't feel like most people were missing that many shots on Bastion, anyways.
I was gonna say, like, you know, prime, like even if you were shooting a squishy from like 30 meters, like if he didn't have cover, he would still evaporate. Like it didn't, you know. I don't think I've ever on Bastion. I'm thinking of all the times I play Bastion. You know, I've never been like, oh damn, I died because my spread wasn't tight enough. You know, so. Yeah, it's we'll definitely see more Bastion play, I guess, but
maybe, you know, it just depends, right? Like Bastion's such a situational hero.
yeah, and he's such like feast or famine. Like I think his design just sucks, honestly.
I mean, because well, at the end of the day, it's like it's just one of those unintentional design choices. It's like someone suggested earlier. They brought up how Sideshow suggested how, and this is gonna link together. I promise you, it's gonna link together. Sideshow suggested that Moira should remain a bad overall healer, but just be really survivable, right? When that's like her thing is like she fades away and she zooms around and she breaks her ankles and then you know you can't get her, but she also doesn't do a lot of healing.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that it turns very quickly into a situation where it's like that's cool and all, but she doesn't do enough damage or enough healing. And like sustain and burst heal in Overwatch has gotten to the point where you just need it so badly just to live because of like comps like Bap Zen or even Dive. Like you just need like there's so much damage on the field now where you can't even do that. So I don't even think that'd be a good compromise for her because then she's just nerfed to the ground and out of the meta in a lot of ways, I feel, which I'm okay with personally. Yeah, I'm okay with. And I think Bastion falls under the same trap, right? Where it's like, oh, wow, he does all this damage once he gets in the turret form. But it's like, yeah, but then you're a gigantic robot Gundam walking through the field and you're getting shot from everywhere and you're not very survivable. You don't do a lot of damage. You have no extra utility in the fight in terms of mobility or anything else. And so you're not actually useful until you get the turret mode. And the problem is that Overwatch as a game is just like slowly just got to a meta form where it's all about like the most you can get at once rather than like situational picks. It's always like, what is the most ubiquitous value you can get at all times? Because the game is always ongoing and always happening, and you have to deal with like ult economy and all this extra damage and stuff like that. And I think that's where like Bastion sort of fits into that problem is that you don't get a lot of like crazy amount of utility from him until he's in turret form, and then he's sort of stuck in place.
Yeah. So there was one comment in chat. I assume you'll be the one to clarify. It says Brig Zen is a thing. Is that so much healing? Because you had mentioned Bap Zen and Brig Zen. Do you want to kind of explain where that fits into the
Brig Zen is more of just like it's the burst, right? And also you have to remember that like it's not a lot of healing, but it's still burst, right?
Yes.
Because it's like so instead of the inverse of you have a lot of healing, you have a lot of burst. So you can do tons of damage through Discord. You have Zen does a lot of damage, and also on top of that, you still have key burst healing moments with Transcendence and also armor packs. And so you still have burst healing. So that's what everything in Overwatch is sort of focused on at this point. It's all about really, really huge moments of value that you can do pretty constantly versus like very specialist picks that only happen once in a while, I think, which sort of Bastion falls under. So I just think it's too good. Just think it's too good.
Okay.
But that's sort of, I mean, overall, what are our thoughts on experimental? I would say I like seeing Moira nerfs. I like seeing some of this stuff get changed, but I'm not huge on it, honestly, one way or another. I don't feel like it's really changed anything.
I mean, I'm not going to write home to mom about it. You know, she listens to this podcast anyway, so I don't have to. But, you know, they are changes. I am not mad about them.
Very neutral.
I have no strong opinions one way or the other. They are changes, you know. What do you think about the open queue competitive happening now? So they've got
Yeah, they said that on the developer update, right?
yeah. So it wasn't in the patch notes; it was in the developer update. But they're going to have 2 competitive modes now. They're going to have the classic 2v2 and then an unlocked, which they're calling open queue, right?
Yeah, and they said that it was like a very popular feature in Korea comparatively to like other parts of the world. Um, and so, and I hate to, and then also I'm afraid to like bring up that point because then we start getting very quickly into like the whole like grass is always greener scenario of like, oh, well,
Yeah.
this region is blah, 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 this region. And so, which there's obviously some very clear distinctions to be made there, but it's, you know, it gets me back into my feelings where like we're almost getting back to hero pools of like, I feel like we're starting to get to the point once again where we've made all this progress of like, we've made the game enjoyable to sort of play. We've finally added roll queue. We've added like all these other like salute. We've added 222. We've added hero locks. We've added hero pools so we don't have the same metas forever, even if they're on ideal systems, right? Like once again, not defending hero pools is the perfect system. It's more of just the idea of like we're getting to a point where we're starting to get some of these I changes we wanted for. And now I'm seeing an outcry of people starting to walk it back and people that are saying like, no, 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 we don't want this. And now it's like, oh, open queue is right. It doesn't mean open queue is going to be the biggest thing, right? But like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, open queue is back. And now you don't have to worry about roll queue and long queue times. And it's like, well, I feel like this is just once again bringing us sort of back down the horseshoe. We're going down the horseshoe back to the place we were before. Potentially, not saying that's going to be the case, but potentially of like, remember all the complaints we had of you didn't have healers, you didn't have tanks, you know, you didn't have guaranteed like all these things. You had a stagnant meta. Feel like we have to once again remember that, but who knows? It's an interesting concept, and maybe if it gets all the people out of roll queue that aren't enjoying roll queue and gives them something that's separate to play, then it eases a lot of friction there, right?
And I think
That's
one of
my
the more
opinion.
interesting things that was brought up is that you can kind of view it as an alternative to like quick play. You know, there's if you don't want to play comp, you know, you don't want to try super hard on your main account or something like that. You want a little bit more of a relaxed environment, but still the competitive rule set and kind of people who are competitively minded. You know, open queue might be a great alternative for that because like if you want to actually, you know, sometimes I just want to relax and frag and you know, but quick play is a disaster, I think is the right way to put it. So, you know, I agree with a lot of the people who were talking about being excited about it because it was kind of like a competitive experience, just a little bit more structured than quick play. It's that nice sort of middle ground. It is kind of, you know, strange that it has the, you know, I always dislike the addition of multiple competitive queues or leaderboards. Like, you know, I definitely feel like there should be like the one true ranking or the one true ladder. So, you know, having 2 of them is like, sure, but as long as people are having fun and, you know, if it's not going to be roll locked, so 222 isn't a thing, maybe we can have all the DPS players go over there and have fun in the glory days of 5 DPS, 1 support, and everybody flames the support. You know, it's it is what it is. Hopefully it doesn't dilute the player base. That's probably like the one main criticism that I could see having some merit, but yeah, well, I mean, we will have to see how it
Pans out.
Pans out. I was going to say plays out, but that works too.
Plays out, pans out.
Mm-hmm. You know what else we're going to have to see play out? The May tournament.
Segue. Good segue. Excellent segue. Right, chat?
Yeah.
I think that was a good segue.
I got a 7 out of 10 for that one.
That's not bad. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I like this. I think we do. I think the May tournament is something we actually haven't really taught. Wow, the scores are only increasing actually.
Yeah, man.
10 out of 10.
I thought that was, man, I can do better than that. I am going to, that was good. Good motivational hit. I'm going to make sure that my next segue. So you guys want to know a true story about the word segue? Don't give me that face, Avast.
Well, I'm waiting to hear it.
I don't feel like you are properly enthused for this story.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. Okay, I'm moving past. You know, actually, before we move on to the next topic, moving away from that, moving away from that one is someone brought up again the guild feature requirement. Like when we bring up like that.
You don't want to hear my story? Amazing.
I mean, you just said you're not enthused about it, so I'm just like, you know, I'm honestly not that
expected you to get enthused. Okay, I'm telling my damn story.
Okay,
when I was in university, my thesis paper, I didn't realize that there was 2 different spellings of the word segue. So I used the wrong one in my thesis paper, and and my advisor would continuously mock me for this by miming to be like rolling around on one of those little mechanical scooter things. So, yeah, I don't make that mistake anymore. But we could segue between topics here. So.
That's I respect the candor of your of letting us know that you didn't know the difference between the two.
Hey man, we learn something new every day.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Old Avast would be interested in Jayne's story. I'm not even gonna start. Nope, not even gonna start with it. Jayne, I can't even start with it. I wanted to talk on the guy that said guild issue for Overwatch, and personally, I don't like guild systems because, if you guys have played any Valorant role recently, Valorant, the newest update, they made a statement on, they want people to get matched like solo. There is not going to be a solo queue and non-solo queue system, sort of like what they have for Overwatch currently.
Yeah.
And also something to note is that like guild systems are not really, I think, a system that are great for FPS titles. It's one thing for like longer trend, like RPG style stuff, like MOBAs or MMOs, not MOBAs, MMOs, because it's oftentimes you're all working towards like similar, like grindy quest lines and like you have dungeons and things like that. But like place in and out, like type of in matchmaking games, I don't think guild systems are ever really the ideal, unless they've been put in place since the very beginning to build the culture. Because you can't really introduce them halfway through because also all the games that comes out now culturally is like esport as like game titles. No one really hops into a multiplayer game anymore. It's like, I can't wait to find all these people in a guild and make a guild, right?
Yeah.
It's like it just doesn't happen anymore. And it's not that it's not a good idea necessarily. It's just that the culture of games has changed a lot, especially in multiplayer like FPS titles. And unless you're forcing at the beginning, I just don't think it's going to work.
And I think one of the kind of biggest changes to make guilds less relevant, not just in FPS titles, like the League of Legends has a club system. Do they call it a club? I'm not sure what they call it, but the invention and proliferation of Discord has probably contributed greatly to the demise of gaming guilds. How's that for a headline? But like even if you do have some sort of gaming guild, this isn't really early World of Warcraft days where you actually needed to use kind of in-game systems in order to organize your guild and in-game mail and things like that. Any sort of these guild structures are going to be managed on something external like Discord channel, and then the only really thing that a guild system in my mind would be useful in a game like Overwatch is if you do have kind of like these like a ladder ranking system. I think that would be fantastic, but you don't really need anything else other than that. Have 12 people be able to include it on a team. Any 6 members from that 12 can compete, like play it, so you could have subs or something like that, and just have a 6-man ladder. I think that'd be great. So
yeah, like a community run, like in-game community tournaments type of thing through the guild system. Is sort of what you're suggesting. I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Or just a separate ladder. It doesn't, you could have that clash system, like League's clash system, where they host this kind of dynamically generated bracket every other weekend or something like that. But if you also just had a system where there was, instead of solo queuing, where like the only people who could partake on the ladders were 6 stacks in teams, sort of thing, I think that'd be really cool. And that would
be a good way to incentivize it, right? Is you actually add incentives.
Yeah,
you incentivize it by there being incentives, obviously.
And then why don't you have that? We have things like the Open Division, which currently have no attachment to the client, no attachment to the launcher or the website or anything like that. So maybe you could just connect things in that way, so your path to pro doesn't suck. Okay,
you're getting into hysterics. Next, you're gonna ask for other things. I am just
showing the proper amount of enthusiasm that you did not give my segue story.
You're asking for just all sorts of things. What's next, Jayne? Huh?
There's proper transition. The crazy part is that beautiful segue that I scored like 8.73 out of 10 on. We didn't actually use that segue. We didn't even.
I mean, we just store that one in the bank. That's earning interest. That's earning segue interest towards the next segue usage.
To my next motorized scooter. Yeah. It's amazing how many people in chat don't even remember that the segue was a thing. Are all of you guys like 12 or something? Segway was hugely popular. Early 2000s.
What would be an appropriate incentive? Asked Rapier Man. An appropriate incentive would just be the community run tournaments where like you get cool rewards on the launcher, maybe you get your team's name up there like in the boards. Plus, since they already have it done for open division through like BlizzBucks would be pretty, there's really easy ways to start base level integration of tournaments of that style. And I actually think if they do it like that, I wouldn't be opposed to a guild system. I'm opposed to a guild system. It's just, here's a guild system. It's going to replace matchmaking and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
I'd be like, this is not going to work. But like, if there's actually like, if it's built into sort of a ongoing tournament style, like community system through the launcher, I actually think that's a pretty easy way to actually integrate it properly to begin with, and then maybe expand outward from there, because it actually creates a real purpose to use it outside of just people that just do the normal games culture of just, they get in, they log in, they queue, right? And there's no real need to do a guild system. So, I think that's the easiest way to start about with it. And I've heard other people say similar, but it's always something to revisit. And I like the idea. I would like to see tournaments in the launcher. Don't other games do it? Didn't like Fortnite have like systems like that, right? Where a lot of their competitive stuff is done through the queues through the launcher. I believe it is.
I have still played about like 2 games of Fortnite, so unfortunately,
I believe it is.
Okay,
is my answer. That is my answer to that.
I'm certainly not going to challenge on you.
Okay. Well, we went backwards when we were supposed to go forwards. So let's go forwards, huh? To the May tournament. To the May tournament, huh? If you guys haven't seen, we have the graphic they released. Oh crap! I just closed it. I closed it. Now I have to open back up. 2 out of 10. I see you guys are wildly inconsistent. But they released the graphics showing the tournament style system, right? And they originally it was going to be 20 teams because everyone was supposed to like be traveling and having LAN events, right? But now it's there's 13 teams in NA, 7 teams in Asia. And so the qualifiers are going to be, they're going to have like, everyone pretty much gets to participate in the tournament, but there's a knockout round before to who goes into the next set of like knockout rounds, and before they go into the final day where they get placed against like the higher seed teams, like the 1 through 4 and stuff for NA. And next weekend, or this upcoming weekend, is the final weekend before it starts.
Yes.
Before the May tournament in proper starts. And so we're sort of at a pretty close to the point where we know all of our standings moving in, especially for the NA region, and I think for all the regions in general. And I think we have to talk about how really the race for like the 1 through 4 seeds and that coveted 13th seed is looking.
The coveted 13th seed. So the one thing about the May tournament, and this is the month of May, not the hero May, as for those of you freaking out in chat. No, we're not just imagine just a tournament of May 1v1s or something like that. That would be awful. 6v6 Mays, no cooldown? How about not? Anyway, so I was looking through this. I looked at the post on the Overwatch League news site, trying to figure out the format for the tournament. And I think the most important aspect about this tournament that not a lot of people are talking about is how the seeding actually works. So if you look at the graphics, it'll say like 5 to 7 or 9 to 12 here. And the way that it's seeded isn't kind of a traditional sort of bracket style where, 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, sort of things like that. As you move on into the brackets, the people like the teams, the higher ranked teams select their opponents.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. So like, especially once you get into the top 4, you don't actually, even if you're in the top 4 and you bypass the actual quarterfinals, it's still much more valuable to even be third because you get to pick your opponent. So, the first place person, they aren't playing the weakest team. They play any team they want to, whether that's the weakest team, whether that's whatever, anything like that. So it's just adding just a hint of flavor, because I think the last time they did this, the gladiators just like disrespected somebody. I don't even remember who it was.
Wasn't it Valiant? Because it was Battle of LA stuff?
I do think it was Valiant. Yeah, they picked Valiant or something, which was a little bit stronger team because they were still confident in being able to beat them or something like that. So it was Bastion, Valiant. I don't remember. My memory sucks. Long story short, we're going to have drama and excitement because it's not a standard bracket. You can just have people picking their opponents. So with that in mind, which is super critical to understanding how these brackets work, what do you think is the most important match of the weekend and why, Mr. Avast?
Well, I mean, I think pretty much no matter what happens in the weekend, right? It's sort of the watch of like the games of like what are the possible outcomes of watching the different matches,
Yeah.
And Fusion are locked in on first seed for NA at this point. They have 11. They're pretty locked in. They're 11-1. There's no one. I don't think there's really any match. I think there's like a very, very slim possibility for Shock to potentially match them if Fusion also lose. It's like a super slim possibility though. But all things considered, and based off Fusion's performances, that we know that Fusion is going to be at 1.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I guess it's not, because based on May, Fusion might not be at 1. It would actually be Mayhem, right? Because based off in the May, it actually their performance in May. So wouldn't it be Mayhem? I think that's actually how it's gonna work. Yeah, it is. It is. It's Mayhem. So Mayhem is at the potential to be #1 seed in the May tournament because it's based off your performance in May, because the qualifiers started in the beginning of May. Can you believe that?
Where do I go? I did all of my predictions based off of the current standings. Where's the standings for the month of May then?
The standings for the month of May are hard to find, admittedly. I'm just using over.gg and basing, I'm just using over.gg and then extrapolating based off the recent results. So I think Wiki has an article says just very tired. Wikipedia.
May tournament Overwatch. I'm just gonna take all of my notes and just throw them into.
Well, I mean, your notes. Like for the most part, the points are still the same. It's just the teams will change a little bit. Like, but still, the only real big upset there is like Mayhem being so high up because they've had an admittedly pretty easy schedule.
And Mayhem are playing an easy team this weekend as well, right? They're playing Washington.
They play Justice.
Yeah,
they play Justice.
So like that one's gonna happen, and then
Titans play, or I should say, Fusions play Titan. Fusion plays Titan, so like they're pretty assured.
Yeah, they're pretty assured. Like their only loss was to the Internal, and that was not in the month of May. I'm pretty sure that was either early March or late February. You know, they only have that one loss. That loss was, a map 5 and ancient history at this point. So Philadelphia definitely going to be up there in the standings. You know, it's like the funny thing I think about the 12th and the 13th spot is that we're almost guaranteed to see a Boston versus Washington Justice match for the I don't know, the toilet bowl. Is that what you're going to call it? You know, because 13 is
yeah, maybe. Here I'm looking through the Liquipedia regular seat matches for it to see. Here it is. Okay, so I'll link it to you in the chat, Jayne, because I'm very nice like that. This is free. Next one is going to cost you.
Unlucky.
But if you see the current standings are Mayhem's at 2-0 plus 6. Shock's 2-0 plus 5. 6 because they're 6-1. Valiant's 2-0 plus 4, 6-2, and then Fusion's 2-0 plus 3. So those are your current top 4.
So we're gonna have to figure this out live. We're gonna rewrite the notes. Okay, so let's start out with last place. So there's 4 potentials for last place. So there's the Toronto Defiant, the Vancouver Titans, the Boston Uprising, the Houston Outlaws. I already looked at the Vancouver Titans. Pretty sure they're gonna lose both of their matches, right? Because their matches are against the Philadelphia Fusion and the Houston Outlaws. Who do you think is going to win between the Houston Outlaws?
You know, that's the thing. They're currently tied for 12th, right? So, either way, they're going to play each other.
I mean, they're tied for 12th based off of map score, but like Vancouver Defiant and Vancouver Titans, they still have the same match score. Like they're all 0-2.
That's true. They're 0-2, so it'd be the map. I mean, actually, there is a possibility for some movement about. For most likely would be potentially Titans to come in there, but. Honestly, I have a hard time believing, like, if you look at the matchups, because Boston is playing. Is Boston?
They're playing the Gladiators. They're playing
Gladiators, right? Yeah, they're probably going to get smacked. Titans get to play Outlaws, but they're also going to play Fusion, so they'll get smacked in one game, but they have a potentially close game, in the next game. So I still think my gut feeling is on Boston being dead last.
Yeah,
that's my gut feeling. I think Titans could actually show up against Houston a bit if they give them a little bit of time.
Boston's likely to go 0-3. Vancouver and Titans are, depending on the Houston Outlaw, like one of them are going to be the bottom. And then the Toronto Defiant are playing who this weekend? They're playing Valiant.
Yeah, they're playing a team that's been doing much better as well. I mean, Valiant's also had a really tough schedule to begin with. I think their schedule sort of undercut how good they actually were because they had such a hard schedule to begin with, and now they're getting a little bit easier one. So Valiant could very well win that. I think the biggest shifts that could happen is that as long as Fusion smack their game, because Shock are playing Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
There's a real chance for Fusion to jump up, or Valiant to jump up and take like the number 2 spot. It just depends on the map scores, So it's actually very much in flux right now. Mayhem are looking like a shoe-in for first seed, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah, especially with a Washington game this weekend,
It's gonna be close.
They're +6 on map score, so even with Philadelphia Fusion just rolling the Vancouver Titans 3-0, right? It's unless Florida Mayhem loses, like not a map, the entire match against.
That's why it's much more likely that I think if anything, Fusion or Valiant would take Shock's spot because Shock's only +5. So and since Fusion have a very easy game, if they just roll it really hardcore, they could then be +6. And also be 3-0.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's a real chance for Fusion to just plant Shock since they're playing Rain, who is currently 5th seed, and is doing all right.
Yeah. The crazy thing is that on the Asian side of the bracket, New York Excelsior and Seoul Dynasty are 5th and 6th respectively. So Charge are actually first with their 3-0.
Yeah.
Chengdu Hunters, it must be a typo here, but they're in last.
No, not a typo. Not a typo.
You sure?
I'm very certain.
Unlucky.
Very certain.
My boys, my boys not doing well.
My boys.
Yeah. So the Hangzhou Spark, their game this weekend is against the London Spitfire. So that makes it a lot better for New York and Seoul Dynasty because the 3rd and the 4th ranked teams are both playing against each other. And then Spark plays actually 2 games that same weekend. So their second game is against New York, and Seoul is playing Chengdu. Unlucky. So yeah, like 3rd and 4th are playing each other, and then so New York Excelsior, Seoul Dynasty, you actually could see pretty much the entire Asian bracket swap pretty much, except for 1st and 2nd place, because Shanghai Dragons playing against London Spitfire, that should go the way of Shanghai Dragons, I would imagine. I would think
so as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, at this point, anything's possible because London actually came out looking okay. Looking decent, so I do think there's like a chance, but I don't think so. I think Dragons are so far and ahead above the majority, even with the loss to Dynasty. But I think Dynasty also people are just underestimating because they came out with a kind of a bad streak to begin with.
Yeah, and then with Guangzhou Charge, their last match is going to be against the Chengdu Hunters, and with them already at a +7 map score, they're pretty much guaranteed to be first place. Pretty much guaranteed.
But pretty much a pretty interesting tournament style, and also I think it brings up once again something that's funny is that unlike other regular tournament qualifiers where you would play against a variety of teams, like, well, actually, I guess even if you would, it's still the thing. It's just the strength of schedule has no doubt helped Mayhem.
Yes.
And the strength of schedule has no doubt helped Mayhem very heavily to be a potential first seed. Like, there is no way around it. So pretty much it's going to be the thing of like, does Mayhem come in at first? And then also, do they actually perform at a first seed level in the tournament? Is sort of the move. And then if Boston actually end up being lower seed than Titans, then I think once again we have to be like, what's going on here with this team? And who is just as even playing with the other DPS? Stratus and Corey are both gone.
Yeah.
Who is the other DPS player?
Now there was that, we didn't talk about it earlier, but there is a new kind of change to the league structure or the way the teams are structured. Have we talked about that yet?
We haven't talked about the new 14-day contracts.
Yeah. So there was an announcement post that talked a little bit more about this, but they've introduced a mechanic where teams can sign a player to their team for 14 days, which is So
and there's pretty much no restrictions really. Like it's like you get a prorated rate of like what the contract would be, which is how most contracts that get signed for Overwatch League in like the middle of the season or whatever is you get a prorated rate of the salary you agree to. So. And the 14-day contracts from all sounds like it's most the same, but there's really no restrictions. A lot of the restrictions that are focused around like other types of contracts, 2 ways. 14 days sort of just we recognize situations crazy. Albert of the Florida Mayhem, the Mayhem GM, said that these have been out actually for a while. It's just they've been a proactive measure, not a reactive measure. It's just it hadn't been made public until recently.
Until there is hope necessary, I suppose. Because we originally thought that the player requirement for the teams was 8, and then we heard that it was 7, and it had been that for a while. And I think this is probably another change that happened likely around the same time. So, even if Washington doesn't pick up a new player, you could definitely see them picking somebody up just under that 14-day contract just to kind of tide them over sort of thing. Maybe you could definitely use that contract as a trial. Maybe that's what Boston is doing with theirs. They've been basically playing shuffleboard with their their players going everywhere, released, hired, picked up. Yeah, ridiculous what Boston.
Yeah, someone said that Brucein mistook that as the upper limit. The 14 days.
Yeah, it does make the OWL speedrun even faster. True.
It's gonna be. I think it's actually a great tool because of where the current situation is with everything considered, with like COVID and the fact that we're all this craziness is happening. So I do think the 14-day contracts are a pretty interesting tool to help
Yeah.
combat those. But it also brings up I don't know, it brings up a lot of interesting points of like, is the same vein of like, let's say for example, the Titans org, Flame, the old GM for Outlaws, said like, is this roster considered anything other than a stopgap for Titans, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this just a roster that got like clearly this roster when you look at it for the most part was just they looked at the NA leaderboards for contenders and like, okay, we're picking this team,
100%.
you know?
That's what
So
they did.
and they mixed and matched a little bit. So they did, and like, is there any guarantee that this roster will last? And then with the 14-day contracts, it's like it does allow teams to have a lot of flexibility with how they approach things and solve some pertinent issues, but it also allows for teams to not have to necessarily commit to anything and to sort of rotate.
We don't know that the Vancouver Titans players are on these 14-day contracts, right?
As far as I'm aware, we don't know publicly. I'm not really aware even privately. Honestly, I don't even have the juice in relation.
I mean, that sounded really suspicious, my friend.
No, it is not. I actually don't have the juice.
Okay, no juice. No juice here, chat. Go away.
Juice free.
It would be a very, very ballsy move for Vancouver Titans to just make this huge roster announcement, but really only have them in for 14 days, and then just a brand new roster, just bait and switch.
I mean, it's technically within the rules, but also it's probably
possible, but like, yeah,
it's worse PR, and also I would imagine it's one of those things that's like probably costs more in the long run to do it repeatedly versus just signing a prorated like season contract, you know? Because it's like the whole like, if I buy a $14 pairs of shoes every couple months as opposed to just buying like $100 pair of shoes for 1 year or something, you know? Like it costs more over time to do it that way. But I don't actually know the specifics. It might actually be cheaper. Who knows?
Who knows? Not us.
But it's going to change the face of the league a bit. I think having flexibility is good because teams also have shied away at times from like the two-way contracts, who they can now have 4 of, because of the rules around them, you know? So having some much more flexible restrictions for roster movement, I think is very important because it actually allows teams to utilize roster depth and utilize also like back when there were contenders teams, they're not there anymore. And I do think a big part of the reason why contenders teams, at least a portion of it, why they were not viewed very favorably is not just the cost, but because it was such a pain to utilize two-way players. So it's like, what's even the point, you know, when you're going to pay someone an Overwatch League level salary and you can't even utilize it properly. Now, I know they amended some of the rules with them, and they have changed them a bit since then, but more flexibility with rosters is generally better as long as it's not like, you know, essentially exploiting players, I would say.
So shifting gears a little bit, one of the last details about the Overwatch, the May tournament that we haven't talked about is the fact that there's going to be no hero pools during the tournament at all. So that's completely different. You know, since hero pools have actually come in, this is going to be the first time that's happened. You know, in my opinion, this is basically having no hero pools for one weekend or one tournament is essentially the exact same thing as they're basically keeping hero pools in. You know, it's still going to be a new meta that exists primarily only for 1 week. You know, people know that this is happening in advance longer than 1 week. You know, it's not like we're finding out that there's no hero pools on Sunday, but it's still, you know, after playing in this meta-less world, just returning to a no hero pool restriction. Do you think it's actually going to change very much the level of play, or what's your?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty short time, right? Because it's only for a weekend.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And then it's right back. So
at that point, you might as well just consider it just a different hero pool.
Yeah, it's just a different kind of hero pools, at least in the perspective of the team, right?
So if anything, I would imagine though that the strengths that we've already seen are going to be repeated, right? You know, it's still going to be really good.
Yep.
May.
Yeah.
Like double shield comps. Like I mean, Ryan Diva used to be the meta before, so Ryan Diva would probably you probably see a lot of. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Ryan Diva and like May McCree, things like that. So it's going to be interesting because it does allow some flexibility, right? Because of hero pools, teams have had to play with a lot of different compositions. It's that weird paradox. Like hero pools sort of stifles what you can learn and perfect, but it also artificially encourages teams to play all these different comps. So teams could actually be walking into the May tournament being like, we actually know of all these comps that can work now.
Yeah, true.
And they could be actually they could be running comps that generally you wouldn't have played before if we had just left no hero pools in place before.
Now,
But also on the inverse, maybe not.
Counterpoint to that, though, some of these compositions are only going to work because their counters were banned.
Yes.
So very much not all of them are going to work.
So it's going to be more of a. I think it's a test.
Yeah.
It's a test to see if hero pools have actually added any sort of depth of thought and forced teams to experiment out of the comfort zone, or if it's purely just like teams are getting prodded off the cliffside with pointy sticks, the Blizzard pointy sticks of hero pool restrictions, and that's the only reason that we've seen any of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the test. And we also need to do mailbag, by the way, because we are fast running out of time, and we have off the break after this for all the Call of Duty fans. So we do need to do mailbag.
It is Thursday, isn't it?
It is.
Man, time is an illusion. Okay, let's get to this mailbag here. Somebody sent me an email this week for mailbag.
An email?
Yeah, I got an email. Do you want me to read my email?
Well, if it's appropriate, sure.
I was going to make a joke, but that was definitely not an appropriate one. Okay, this one from Paul Kiefer says, because last week it was pretty much an open mailbag, right? We're like, what do you care about for Overwatch? And this gentleman responded, said that he thinks that there should be hands-on training for beginning Overwatch players. He says that I've been rather concerned about how the powers that be have a sort of laissez-faire attitude about how those who are close to or at beginning status are simply given some simple instructions on how to play the game, but there is nothing to help them climb other than to throw them to the wolves and then let experience teach them how to properly play the game in terms of strategy and tactics. There's more. We definitely get sent essays, but that is the gist of it. He thinks that in essence, there should be either a better tutorial system or something to help people climb. Like ranked is a different beast entirely. The idea about even team fights for people transitioning over from Call of Duty originally, the concept of team fights and not just like respawn and get back to the fight as soon as possible. That was new for a lot of people. So what do you think? Can Overwatch do a better job of teaching new players how to play the game the right way?
I mean, does any game really have any sort of mechanics to that style? I feel like there's only so much you can really do outside of teaching the basics, right? Because then you start getting into weird. Do you want the Overwatch team to produce content piece, overall tutorials on all these? I mean, they can, right? They could, but I don't know if it's necessary. I really don't know if it's necessary because does League, someone is saying in chat that League of Legends
has a great tutorial. It is really quite good.
If League has a great tutorial, then I don't know exactly what's so great. Does it? I don't exactly know, in comparison to someone that because I haven't played a lot of League, Jane. So compare the League tutorial to the basic intro practice range stuff that Overwatch shows you. What are the differences that miss?
I mean, it takes you through multiple different stages, different aspects of the game. It teaches you a couple different heroes and how they work. It definitely walks you through it step by step sort of thing. In the Overwatch tutorial, at least the last time I played it, it was this is Soldier, there's no other heroes, have fun.
Okay, here's how you aim.
Yeah, really, it's just it's more or less a soundbox. Now, I've certainly played games with worse tutorials, like EVE Online, which, that tutorial was something else. But, even resources, something like Knowledge Base, there's no sort of official documentation for Overwatch. So even if you, all of the wikis, all of those are fan run and updated, and historically not all of them have been accurate. They've been inconsistent for a lot of different things, and then there is a lot of that stuff can be covered by content creators, and is there really much purpose for a Blizzard to make that sort of really in-depth tutorial stuff when content creators are going to do it anyway?
Do it themselves, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also for League, if I'm being honest, League has a lot higher barrier to entry than Overwatch, right? Because League, other than the aiming aspect, League is you have to know sort of how waves work. You have to know items. You have to know skills. I mean, you have to know skills for Overwatch too, right? But there's an RPG mechanics, there's item builds, there's waves, there's towers. So I do think League is a little bit, especially because there's a cajillion characters too. It's a lot more higher barrier to entry than Overwatch, honestly. It's just Overwatch has an FPS mechanic that is obviously very different and changes the game, right? So I don't think you really need anything that crazy.
And I think that the Overwatch tutorial is really quite good for people who are kind of new to FPS games. It might be their first or just very casual in general. I watched a pretty interesting video on YouTube the other day where it was this guy who was basically putting his wife through a cruel set of experiments, having her play different video games like Portal and Dark Souls and things like that, who wasn't a gamer at all. And, one of the things is that she didn't even realize that she could move her camera around in Portal. Like, she didn't know that she could look around, so she was just like awkwardly strafing and sliding against walls and things like that. So, for a game that is kind of much more casual centric, the Overwatch tutorial will get you to the point where at least you're functional in the game. And the amount of people in the game who do play the competitive ladder seriously and would kind of get use out of that knowledge. You want to find that nice balance where you teach somebody enough to have fun, but you definitely don't want to overwhelm them or think that a game has kind of too much information so that there's a lot info dumping on new players can sometimes be just as bad as not giving them anything and having them just discover things on their own time.
I think the most basic stuff is just you run through abilities, you run through some basic aim stuff, and you talk about ult charge a little bit and how healing and damage relate to ult charge. I don't even remember if the tutorial does that at this point. It's been so long since I've even touched it. But realistically, I feel like an FPS game, even with abilities, is going to be a lot lower barrier to entry than League of Legends.
Okay, so that was Paul Kiefer's email.
And I think we really only have about time for one more since we're running like a tiny bit over for off the break. So the one I want to look at is one. I'm a big fan of this one. It's from Nitrogen Doppler. How do I say this name? I'm gonna look at this one.
Nitrotendolfer. I can't believe you're actually out of all of the submissions that we got. This is the one
I think this is a good one. If you combine Avast and Jayne, then they would either be hairless or have a head and face full of hair. Was one of the other responses to the open mailbag.
I mean, you're not wrong.
So,
and that's all I have to say.
And I honestly, great response. This is what I like about open mailbags is that you give us some really great thoughts outside the box. There, and we get to hear things like that, and really everything else we've sort of.
Man, I thought it was Tuesday. I thought that we could just keep going, but
no, we don't have extra time because we're off the break.
Man.
But overall, good stuff. But we also, we should pose a mailbag question for next week as well before we go.
Should. Well, we could just delay this one because there are a lot of good responses. Like this was an open mailbag.
Should we push back some? I mean, should we just reopen the mailbag?
Yeah, we'll just keep an open mailbag for this weekend, and then next episode is Tuesday, where we are not time limited, so we can actually go through as many of the good ones as we want. So same thing this week, open mailbag. Let us know anything that's on your mind about Overwatch or not. I'm not your dad.
Anything about the show or Overwatch, or about the topic that we talked about, but maybe if you want to talk to us about the tutorial system that we talked about between League and Overwatch. If you want to submit comments to the mailbag, you either can just pose them to us on the YouTube chat on the video. You can send them to us on Twitter. I think those are probably the easiest ones. There's probably the easiest ones by far. You could email us, I guess.
Please don't email.
But no, probably don't email.
Please don't do that.
There's generally someone that makes a Reddit thread as well for mailbags.
Find my email anyway.
Do you even have a list? You don't even have. Do you?
No, it was it was my work email.
So yeah, I would say the YouTube comments below for the video that gets posted on YouTube. Add us on Twitter. Sometimes there's a Reddit thread, and those are probably the best options overall if you want to submit to Mailbag, and we will scroll through and find those. YouTube is the best, though. Use the YouTube comments because they are the easiest to look at.
Absolutely.
By far.
Also, since if you are watching this pre-recorded, whether it's YouTube or whatever, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you missed out on the pre-show. We're doing pre-shows now. So somewhere 10, 15 minutes before the show starts, we're just going to casually go live and hang out with the people who show up to chat first. So if you have any questions, maybe not a question that is in-depth enough to require a mailbag submission, then consider joining us for the pre-show where we just kind of chill with chat and talk about all the kind of minor happenings and whatever's on our mind that aren't important enough to end up in the full show, but still fun to talk about. So to all of you guys watching on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter live, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. We will see you next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central as per usual. My name is What?
He is Jasper, and I am Casper the Friendly Ghost, and this has been contested. This has been contested. Bye-bye.
Cut.